All right, it's hard to believe, but we are already moving on to week 11 of the 2022 college football season, coming up in a final stretch here. 3 games left for most teams, 3 games in the regular season anyway. Then, of course, we'll have conference championship weekend, the first Saturday in December, playoff selection show the Sunday after that, and the bowl selection show where the bowl games are announced, and then bowl season throughout the month of December leading up to the New Year's Six and the playoff games on New Year's and into the first couple of weeks of January. But I want to talk about some of the week 11 games that are coming up this week in college football. I'm going to kind of do like a top 25 version of game previews today. I'm going to go through a lot of the games involving teams in the top 25. Just give you my brief thoughts on the game, talk about the odds, who I think is going to win, can they cover, that kind of thing. I'm going to go in chronological order based on the time the games are played, not ranking order like 1 through 25. So up first, Friday night, we have a ranked team playing at home. Southern Cal is hosting Colorado. And Southern Cal is a huge home favorite in this one, a 34-point home favorite. Southern Cal will win the game. Colorado might be the worst Power 5 team in the country. I think they're just sitting on 1 win or something like that. They're just a horrible team and really have been bad for several years. 34 points, that is a lot. You see some weird things happen on Friday night games where some better teams lose to some worse teams. That's usually when the better team is going on the road, though. I don't see any way possible Southern Cal loses this game. Caleb Williams is playing well with that stable of wide receivers led by Jordan Addison. They run the ball well. Their defense has been a little suspect to me this year. I think they gave up 35 points to Cal or something a few weeks ago. Don't think they have an elite defense, but their offense is pretty good with Caleb Williams, of course. Lincoln Riley running the show out there. I do think Southern Cal will win. 34 points is just too much for me, even against Colorado. I'll take Colorado in the 34, but Southern Cal will win that game. Will win that game easily. Let's move on to the Saturday games. All right, over on Fox, Saturday afternoon at noon. Is this the big noon kickoff game? Was this the best the Big Ten and the big noon kickoff can do for us this week? Indiana on the road at number 2. Ohio State, again, 12 o'clock over on Fox. No surprise here, Ohio State, a huge favorite in this one. 40-point favorite over the Hoosiers. Again, kind of like the Southern Cal game. I don't see any way Ohio State loses this game. They're going to beat Indiana at home. Southern Cal's at home. Ohio State's at home. Ohio State's going to roll just like Southern Cal. Can Ohio State cover the 40? Well, if the weather's good, yeah. If the weather's good, they might win this game 55-10 or something like that. Who knows? If the weather is bad, Ohio State might still win the game, but it'll be by, 1 score, 2 scores? See Northwestern game from last week. Ohio State's got some issues on the offensive line. I don't care how mad it makes the Ohio State fans. It's just what I notice when I watch them play. Their offensive line looks like 5 boxes of Kleenex. It's just the way it is. Won't be an issue against Indiana. Shouldn't have been an issue against Northwestern, but it was. So we'll see how you do this week. You better check the weather, though, before you bet on this one. Ohio State 40-point favorite. C.J. Stroud, I think, still in the Heisman race, although took a step back last week. Not saying it was his fault. I give Ohio State a lot of hard time about the weather, but that weather was almost impossible to throw the ball into 40-mile. Forget the rain, to 40-mile-an-hour winds. So I'll give him a break on that. I still think he's having a really, really good season up there. Of course, stable of wide receivers. Might be the best in all of college football. Defense playing a lot better this year than it was last year with new defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. They'll handle Indiana, no problem. And sort of trolling, but seriously, if the weather is good, I do think Ohio State can beat them by more than 40 at home. If not, then all bets are off, and maybe just take the over-under on that one is 58.5, but I think Ohio State will roll. Moving right along at a snail's pace, number 5 Tennessee is hosting Missouri. This one comes on 12 o'clock on CBS. Is that right? Damn, CBS, what are you doing? Damn, Tennessee loses a game and they can't even get a 3:30 slot on CBS? What is going on? Voltards back to irrelevancy once again. What a shame. Of course, the Vols got it absolutely pushed in last week by the Georgia Bulldogs in Athens. Georgia just absolutely dominated that game from start to finish. Tennessee never had a chance and never had a shot, despite all the loudmouth soup that the Tennessee fans had been guzzling down for the 2 or 3 weeks leading up to that game. Georgia destroyed them. Tennessee looks to rebound this week at home against a struggling Mizzou team, that's got a decent defense. Not on a level of a Georgia. I do think Tennessee will be able to score in this game. Tennessee's a 20.5-point favorite. I actually like that number being just under 3 touchdowns. I think Tennessee will win and cover in this game. Missouri's just not a great team. Like I said, defensively, they're better than I think they get credit for, but not good enough to really slow this Tennessee game or this Tennessee team down. I do think Tennessee may have a little bit harder of a time running the ball than they think they will, but I do think Tennessee will be able to take advantage of the Mizzou secondary, burn them deep several times with Hyatt, McCoy, the Tillman, that stable of wide receivers. I think Tennessee actually wins this game at home and covers. There's some concern this week about Tennessee having some kind of emotional letdown, kind of the air let out of the balloon last week in Athens. I don't really expect that to happen. There's still a possibility Tennessee could make the playoffs, right? And maybe they need some style points, or maybe they feel like they need some style points to kind of impress upon the committee that even though they lost, they are still a top 4 worthy playoff team. And if that's the case, if they feel that way, then they'll go out here and they'll hang 50 on Missouri if they can. And Tennessee's defense, although not very good, neither is Missouri's offense. I think Tennessee wins this game. I'll lay the 20.5. Tennessee should beat them by 3 or 4 scores. Up next, LSU on the road at Arkansas. This could be a really good game, too. LSU got the big win over Bama last week. They're in the driver's seat in terms of the SEC West. Arkansas has just kind of fell apart here this season, not really living up to the expectations that they set with some pretty good seasons the last couple of years. Their schedule's been absolutely brutal. I mean, in the non-con, they had to play Cincinnati, BYU, and Liberty. Whoever scheduled all 3 of those group of 5 teams in the same season ought to lose their job. I know BYU's not technically a group of 5 school, but I still consider them that because, let's be real, they're a bicycle college. But Arkansas has struggled, and KJ Jefferson, even if he plays in this game, it's clear that he's not 100%. I think he played last week and got yanked for a little while. Didn't look good when he was in there, and I just think LSU is playing with a lot of confidence right now. I don't think LSU is a great team. People have been getting mad at me for saying that. I don't think there are any great teams in the SEC West this year. I just think it's a down year for the SEC West. Obviously, Texas A&M and Auburn are in the toilet. Mississippi State is just kind of what it is. Bama's got 2 losses. LSU lost to Florida State. First-year head coach Brian Kelly, brand new quarterback Jaden Daniels, and yes, he's playing well. But they got beat at home by almost 40 by Tennessee. I just don't think they're a great team. But they're way better than Arkansas, and I do think LSU, even though this game's on the road, will go into Fayetteville and get a win. LSU's only favored by 3.5. I don't think that's enough. I just think Arkansas, I don't want to say Arkansas is in give-up mode. I don't think that's the case. I don't think Sam Pittman will let that happen. He's too good of a head coach. There's just not a whole lot left for Arkansas to play for this year, in my opinion, and I don't think they're interested in playing some type of spoiler role in terms of potentially knocking LSU out of the SEC title game. LSU's bigger concern, I think, comes the last week of the regular season when they play Texas A&M. They play UAB next week, I think, LSU does. So they should handle them. That last game of the season, though, will be interesting against Texas A&M. But I think LSU will get the job done this week and win on the road at Fayetteville. Give me LSU, lay the 3.5. That's just not very many points. Notre Dame also plays at noon this week. Big win last week, of course, at home over the Taters. That's right, Clemson toted their first giant L of the season last week. Notre Dame just destroyed them, really blew them out. Wasn't even a competitive game. A lot of people were picking Notre Dame, or at least thought or said Notre Dame had a chance to win that game. I don't think anybody thought Notre Dame was going to blow them out like that, but that's exactly what they did. The game was never really close and never in doubt. They play Navy this week. It's a road game, but it shouldn't matter. Notre Dame should roll. They're a 15-point favorite. I know Navy runs a weird offense that can be hard to prepare for, but I don't think it's going to be an issue for Notre Dame. 12 o'clock on ABC. I think Rudy goes on the road to Navy, gets a win, and covers the 15. No letdown for Notre Dame either. They keep on rolling. Illinois hosts Purdue. This could be an interesting game. Purdue's kind of an up-and-down team. Now, when they're up, they're never really high up because they're not very good, but I guess really what it is with Purdue is they just play way worse a lot of weeks than you expect them to. They never really play great. When they play up to their ability, they're a decent team. They have a pretty low ceiling, right? Too many weeks this year, though, where Purdue just hasn't even played up to their potential, which, again, isn't very high. Illinois has lost a second game, so they've now dropped a little bit in the rankings. They're sitting at 21, but they're a home team here against Purdue. Purdue is known for their offense, and like I said, and you watch them certain games, and they look really good. You go back and look at them over the past couple of years. They've led the Big Ten in passing most years. It's just not working this year for whatever reason for Purdue. Illinois has got a really, really good defense, top 5 defense in all of college football. Statistically, I think Purdue is going to have a hard time moving the ball and scoring points on that Illinois defense. Illinois is favored at home by just less than a touchdown. That sounds good to me. Give me Illinois and lay the 6.5. Vanderbilt at Kentucky, also at noon. This one on the SEC network. Where's this game at? Is anyone even watching this game is a better question. Vanderbilt, talked about Colorado being one of the worst teams in the Power 5. Vanderbilt, unfortunately, a team that is always on that list. Started off a little bit better this year, Vandy did, than I think a lot of people maybe thought that they would. And they have eclipsed their over-under win total that was set by Vegas in the offseason. So in that respect, I guess they've overachieved. But the point is they're just not a very good team. And even I guess, technically, Kentucky, it's kind of the opposite. Kentucky has sort of failed to live up to expectations this year. Will Levis has been injured and has had to miss a little bit of time. Kentucky is a good team, right? And for Kentucky, that's good. If you look at where Kentucky has been the majority of the years over the last 50 years, they're way above that right now. They're still a long way from being amongst the elite of college football, though. I do think they're a legitimate top 25-ish type team this year, and I do think they will beat Vandy at home, no problem. Has been a little bit disappointing for Kentucky, though. They host Georgia next week, and heading into the season, there was a lot of people that thought that would be a huge game, possibly a game that would help decide the SEC East, and at this point, that's just out the window. Kentucky sort of an afterthought at this point. Most of their fans have moved on to round ball, which started a week or so ago. I do think Kentucky will win. They're an 18-point favorite. I think that's a little bit too much. I'm actually going to take Vandy in the points here. I do think Kentucky will win the game at home, but I'm going to take Vandy to cover the 18. All right, that's it for the noon games. All right, on to the afternoon games. ABC, 3:30, Nebraska on the road at Michigan. Michigan will win. This game will not be close or competitive. Nebraska is an absolute dumpster fire. They finally got rid of Scott Frost, though, which is a step in the right direction. We'll see who they end up hiring for next year, but they're a lost cause for this year. Michigan, of course, still everything to play for, undefeated, has the big game with Ohio State looming here in 2 weeks at the end of the regular season, Thanksgiving weekend. Michigan will roll at home. They are going to absolutely run the ball up and down the field on this Nebraska defense. I have no doubt at all. Sounds like or smells like or looks like a 300-yard rushing game on deck for Michigan here. I expect Michigan to dominate both lines of scrimmage. Nebraska's just got no chance here. I'm going to take Michigan at home. 30.5 is a lot of points. I think Michigan can win by 5 touchdowns, though. I'm going to take the Wolverines and lay the points there. What about Alabama at Ole Miss? We have a ranked versus ranked matchup in this one. Number 9, Alabama on the road at number 11, Ole Miss. 3:30 on CBS. Sorry for your luck, Tard man. Getting pushed down there to noon. What a shame. No one's watching any Tennessee games the rest of the year. That's just the reality. They play Mizzou, South Carolina, and Vandy. Those are their remaining 3 games. So, we'll see you in the at the Sugar Bowl or whatever non-playoff bowl it is Tennessee ends up in. But anyway, where were we? Oh, yeah, Alabama on the road at Ole Miss. Alabama ranked higher, 2 losses. Ole Miss ranked lower at 11, 1 loss, right? This is an important game because technically Alabama and Ole Miss are still both alive for the SEC West. Now, the loser of this game is going to be eliminated, depending, of course, on what happens with the LSU game earlier in the day. But there are some people who think Ole Miss can pull off the upset here. Alabama, it's no surprise, it's no secret anymore. I think everybody's aware of the trouble, the struggles, whatever you want to call it, that Alabama has had on the road, really going back to last season. This is a road game for Alabama out to Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Alabama is favored by 11.5. Now, you got the whole thing about every time Alabama loses, they show up the next week and dominate. That's true. This is not the same Alabama team we've been watching play over the last 10 to 12 years, though. There's something different with Alabama this year. I'm not throwing Nick Saban under the bus, throwing him out in the trash or whatever the case. I still think he can get it turned around next year. Clearly, there's a lot of changes coming at Alabama. Bryce Young's going to be gone after this year. Got to get Jalen Milroe up to speed because he hasn't looked great throwing the ball this year. And I expect Bama to have 2 new coordinators next year, an offensive and a defensive coordinator. I think Saban will get rid of both of those. So as far as this year goes, on the road at Ole Miss going to try to run the ball down Alabama's throat. Now, that has not been easy to do under Nick Saban at Alabama really the entire time he's been there. And as bad as Alabama has been, or as un-Alabama-like as Alabama has been this year, I still don't think it's going to be easy for a team like Ole Miss to just line up and run the ball on Alabama. Now, if Ole Miss wants to pull the upset, that's what they're going to have to do. Zach Evans and that true freshman Judkins are both great running backs. If they can get that going, hit some play action passes, take some shots down the field off the run game, off the play action pass. We know Lane Kiffin is an offensive genius, and we know there's nothing more. Lane Kiffin would like nothing more than to get a win over his old buddy Nick Saban in Alabama. For me, it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that Alabama won last week, so therefore they're going to come out and dominate. I just think Alabama's a better team than Ole Miss. I know Ole Miss is only sitting on one loss, and I do think Ole Miss is probably a legitimate top 15-ish type team. I've not been impressed with Ole Miss on defense this year, and I think Bryce Young, despite the problems Alabama's offense has had with wide receiver this year, I think that Alabama offense is going to put up some points on Ole Miss. Ole Miss gave up 28 points to Vandy, 35 points to Auburn, something like that. Two of the worst offenses in the SEC, just defensively have not played well. I think Alabama will be able to move the ball and put up some points against Ole Miss. I do think Alabama wins the game. Will they win by more than 11.5? I can't go that far. I'm going to take Ole Miss into points here because I do think there's a chance that Alabama enters give-up mode. They're out of the playoff picture for all intents and purposes, likely headed to a Citrus Bowl or some other meaningless postseason destination. I do think there's a possibility Alabama enters give-up mode. Plus, you can't ignore the fact that Alabama has just played bad on the road almost every single road game they've played for the last 2 seasons. You can't just ignore that. And Ole Miss, whatever you think about them, whether you think they're overrated or underrated being at number 11, I think we can all agree they're at least a good team, right? The running game is good. Lane Kiffin's a good offensive mind. The quarterback has played well at times. So I do think there's a possibility Ole Miss pulls off the upset. I'm not picking that to happen. I think Alabama wins the game. But 11.5 seems like a little bit too much considering what I've seen from Alabama this year. I'm going to take Alabama to win and Ole Miss to cover the 11.5. All right, moving right along at a snail's pace. The Taters, a 7-point favorite against Louisville. The Taters looking to rebound. Who's going to play quarterback this week for Clemson? According to Dabo Swinney, it's going to be the ukulele. Our good buddy DJ Uiagalelei, who has been benched and then put back in and then benched again and put back in again. It's the whole QB hokey pokey thing going on there at Clemson, who, of course, took a whooping last week at the hands of Rudy and Notre Dame. Louisville's not a good team. I don't understand the line in this one, I'm going to be honest. Clemson, a 7-point favorite at home. Clemson hasn't lost a home game since 2016, and I know everybody has thrown Clemson away because they lost a game. Oh my God, they're 8-1. They were 10-2 last year, and people, thought they were dead. Now here they are. They're sitting on just one loss. I mean, is Clemson as good as they were from 2015 to 2019-ish during the Deshaun Watson kind of Trevor Lawrence run? No, they're not that good. But they were the best program in football during that 3 or 4 year run. They're still a top 5, 6 program right now in all of college football. I'm not trying to say they're a top 5 team this year. Clearly, I think they're not. But they're still one of the best programs in football. They got a ton of talent on defense. And regardless of what goes on at the quarterback situation, Will Shipley's a hell of a running back. I think Clemson will lean on that this week at home. Regardless of who plays quarterback or if both quarterbacks play, I think Clemson gets the win, and I think they cover the 7 points. What's up next? Penn State hosting Maryland, and Penn State's a 10-point home favorite. And this one, Penn State's a team that people just forgot about. When you're third in the Big Ten East, you might as well be 30th. If you're third in your division, you might as well be 30th in your division. I know there's not 30 teams in a division. I'm just saying. But Penn State is still a really good team, a legitimate top 15 team, and I think you can make an argument it might be a top 10-ish type team. I know they got blown out by Michigan. It wasn't really close in the end against Ohio State, although it was a competitive game for most of the game. They played Ohio State at home, Michigan on the road. Maryland, on the other hand, has been a little disappointing to me this year. I was higher on Maryland in the offseason than most other people were, and I thought Maryland would get a win over one of the big three out of the Big Ten East, being Ohio State, Michigan, or Penn State. So far, that hasn't happened. For that reason, I'm picking Maryland here, but there's nothing I've seen this year that makes me think Maryland's going to win this game. I just want to be right about what I said about Maryland in the offseason, which is ridiculous, I know. But give me Maryland to win on the road at Penn State, even though I wouldn't bet one dime on that actually happening. Boston College on the road at NC State, who people are pretending is the 16th best team in the country. The ACC is not any good. Clemson is good. I don't think there's any other good teams in the ACC. In other words, I don't think there's any other top 25 teams in the ACC. I really don't. I don't care where anybody's got them ranked. The ACC is having a drastically bad year, in my opinion. Let's see what's going on with this one here. Boston College on the road at NC State. NC State's an 18-point home favorite. I don't trust NC State with an 18-point spread. The defense was supposed to be amazing. It's been disappointing. The quarterback was supposed to have his greatest year in his career. He's been hurt half the year. This was supposed to be the year Dave Duran unseated Dabo Swinney and won the division for the first time and made an ACC title game. That's not happening. I do think NC State will win this game at home because Boston College is, as bad as the ACC is, Boston College is one of the worst teams over there. I don't think NC State's winning this game by 18, though, even at home. Give me NC State to win, Boston College to cover the 18. Central Florida at Tulane, also a ranked versus ranked matchup. Let's see. Can we find this one on here? Hanging around. I'm looking. UCF and Tulane. There we go. Tulane's a 1.5-point home favorite, and I like Tulane. UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, Liberty. These are all group of 5 teams that people kind of thought had a chance to be the best group of 5 team heading into this year. Coastal Carolina, maybe you put on that list, whoever. Tulane has been the most impressive team to me in the group of 5 over the course of the entire season. There's been weeks here and there where other teams looked better than Tulane, but if you're judging the season as a whole right now as a 9 or 10 week deal, I'll take Tulane as the best group of 5 team this year. They're at home against Central Florida. I think the Green Wave get the win here. Give me Tulane, lay the 1.5 points. Is that it for the afternoon games? I think it is. Let's move on to prime time. Yep, might as well start 7 o'clock. The primetime game on ESPN. When your number 1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs go on the road to take on Bigfoot Mike Leach, his air raid offense, Mississippi State, 7 o'clock on ESPN. Georgia's a big favorite in this one. Let's see, what is it, 17 or something? Let's see, where are these 16. I think it was 17, so that means it's actually gone down a little bit. Georgia's a 16-point road favorite on the road in Starkville at Mississippi State. An unfamiliar environment for Georgia. This isn't a place where Georgia normally plays, right? Auburn is our team from the West that Georgia plays every single year. The other teams rotate on a 6-year deal, so Mississippi State plays in Athens, and then 6 years later we play there, and 6 years. So we don't play there very often. Unfamiliar environment, whole cowbell deal. Will Rogers throwing the ball 50 times a game. Mike Leach, air raid, Bigfoot offense. That's great. Mississippi State's just not a very good team. Now, just like with Tennessee, we talked about a potential letdown after a really emotional game. You have to consider that factor with Georgia. You also have to consider the fact that Georgia did not play well on the road at Missouri earlier in the season, right? If you're looking at road SEC games for UGA, they dominated South Carolina on the road early in the season, but then really struggled against Missouri a few weeks later. Which version of Georgia do we get, right? That's really the only question, I think, about Georgia at this point. I think everybody's got Georgia number 1 in their poll or their ranking or whatever you want to call it. The question is, in any given week, which version of this year's Georgia team are we going to see? Because I think everyone agrees, if we get the version of Georgia that showed up against Oregon or South Carolina or Tennessee or Florida or Auburn, whatever the case, I don't think there's anybody in the country that can beat Georgia. If we get the version of Georgia that showed up against Kent State or Mizzou, then I think there are a handful of teams that can beat UGA. None of those teams are Mississippi State, though. There's nothing that can happen for Mississippi State to beat Georgia. Sorry. There's not going to be any type of a letdown. Personally, I think Georgia's sleepwalking period is over, right? I think they did have a lull in the middle of the season where they sort of started listening to people talk about how easy their schedule was and how, their schedule didn't even really start until after Halloween and all this kind of stuff. And they basically just went to sleep in the middle of the season and didn't show up against Kent State and Mizzou. I believe that. But if you go back to the last 3 or 4 games, an absolute domination of Auburn, 42-10. The following week, Vandy, 55-0. Now, I know Auburn and Vandy are not good teams. That's the point. When you're a great team and you play a terrible team, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to blow them out. That's what Georgia did. 42-10 over Auburn, 55-0 over Vandy. Then you had a Florida game, 42-20. Is that what that one ended up being? 42-20, I believe. Then you had the Tennessee game. We all saw what happened last week with that. So it's been over a month now, even though people still love to talk about that Mizzou and Kent State game from UGA. That's been well over a month ago. Georgia's played 4 or 5 games since then. It's been 4 or 5 blowouts. 4 or 5 games where Georgia's just absolutely dominated. I don't think we're going to see the Kent State and Mizzou version of Georgia again this season. I think if somebody wants to beat Georgia, they're going to have to play a really, really good game. They're going to have to be a really, really good team, and they're going to have to be really, really well coached. Mississippi State is not a really, really good team. They're just not. I think Georgia goes in and gets the win on the road in Starkville. Can they cover the 16? Yes, they can. I think Georgia will win this game by 3 touchdowns, somewhere in the neighborhood of, 38-13, 38-17, somewhere in that neighborhood there. Give me the Dogs to win on the road and the Dogs to cover. What do we have after that? Great question. Washington on the road at Oregon. The Apple Cup? Is that what this game is? A rivalry game? Washington on the road at Oregon. Highly ranked Oregon, number 6 in the latest college football playoff rankings. Washington is actually ranked in the latest rankings as well, coming in at number 25. Oregon's a 13.5-point favorite. I feel like there's a lot of people who haven't watched a single Oregon game since week 1. And in fact, I know there are a lot of people that haven't watched any Oregon games since week 1. Oregon is a really, really good team. Oregon has the number 2 offense in the country. That's right. Now, you can talk about Pac-12. You can talk about whatever you want. The reality is we're in week 10, 11, whatever we are. Everybody's played some good teams. Everybody's played some bad teams. Oregon's got the number 2 offense in the country. Tennessee number 1, Oregon number 2. Guess who's number 3? Georgia, but that doesn't matter for the purposes of this conversation. Oregon's got the number 2 offense. Bo Nix, in my opinion, is a legitimate Heisman candidate. Will he get an invite to New York? I don't know. But you look at his numbers, his total touchdowns, his rushing yards, and his passing yards, and his total touchdown. He is having by far the best year of his career. He's having a hell of a year. He's up there when you're talking about Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Caleb Williams, Drake May, whatever quarterback you want to talk about for the Heisman, and you go and look at the numbers, Bo Nix is right up there with him. We'll see if he gets an invite or not. But they're a 13.5-point home favorite against Washington. I know this is a rivalry game, and sort of, anything can happen in a rivalry game. Yeah, anything can happen, but you know what usually happens? The better team wins, and that's Oregon. It's also a home game for Oregon. Oregon has the best home field advantage in all of the Pac-12, period. Maybe if you go back 15, 16 years to Southern Cal's heyday when they had Snoop Dogg and Will Ferrell on the sideline and stuff like that, they had a really good home field advantage there. But UCLA and Southern Cal are getting 800 fans apiece to show up to their games these days. So right now, best home field advantage in all the Pac-12 goes to Oregon. I think that matters in a game like this. I'm going to take Oregon. I love the magic number of 13.5 being right under 2 touchdowns. I'm going to take the Ducks to win and the Ducks to cover. What's next? Kansas State on the road at Baylor, 7 o'clock on FS1. Kansas State is a 2.5-point road underdog to Baylor, and I think Baylor wins. Baylor's a team a lot of people have forgotten about. But they're sitting on, just 2 losses? Losses came early in the year, though. People kind of wrote them off. Dave Aranda, I still think, is one of the hottest coaches in all of college football. I would not be at all surprised when the season wraps up here in a few weeks if you start hearing Dave Aranda's name attached to some potential job openings at other places. We'll see. But I really, really like Dave Aranda and what he's doing at Baylor. Made the Big 12 championship game last year. Probably going to come up a little bit short of that this year, but still a pretty good year for Baylor. I think they get the job done against an up-and-down Kansas State team. Kansas State has looked like the best team in the Big 12 at times, and has looked like one of the worst teams in the Big 12 at times. They've had a lot of issues at quarterback, too. Injuries, not just a starter, Adrian Martinez, injuries to their backup, forced to play their third-string guy a couple of times. Home game for Baylor. I'm going to take the Bears to win a close one there. Give me Baylor. Lay the 2.5. What else do we have? TCU on the road at Texas. This game and the Alabama-Ole Miss game, to me, are the 2 biggest games of the weekend. Both have potential playoff implications, right? Does Ole Miss? People forget Ole Miss still has 1 loss. I mean, if Ole Miss runs the table, they're not beating Georgia. Never mind the SEC title game, so that's irrelevant. TCU on the road at Texas. TCU undefeated. Definitely the most controversial undefeated team. TCU is just getting no respect from the average person, and I get it. They're not a name brand team. They don't blow a lot of people out. They've been trailing in the second half of almost every single game they've played this year, in some cases by 2 and 3 scores in the second half. And just like clockwork, they claw their way back, and they end up winning in the end. Can they continue that this week on the road against Texas? No, they can't. I think TCU loses this week. Texas is a good team, and when they play well, they're capable of playing great at times. Now, Quinn Ewers is going to have a good game here because that quarterback from TCU is really, really good, Max Duggan. TCU's defense, though, has been very suspect all year. I think Texas at home is going to put up big numbers offensively. Bijan Robinson could have a big day running the ball for Texas. Texas is a 7-point favorite. Not only does Texas win this game, I think Texas covers. I think it all catches up with TCU this week. It all comes crashing down. I think TCU catches their first L of the season on the road at Texas. Give me the Longhorns. Lay to 7 points. North Carolina on the road at Wake Forest. Another one-loss team that absolutely nobody wants to talk about, them and Ole Miss. But North Carolina's still just sitting there, minding their own business with just the one loss that came earlier in the year at home to Notre Dame. Drake May, quarterback for North Carolina. I talked about Bo Nix a minute ago. Forget Bo Nix. Forget C.J. Stroud. Forget Caleb Williams. Forget Bryce Young. Forget Hendon Hooker or anybody else you want to talk about. Drake May has the best numbers of any quarterback in the country this year, period. The guy's already at 3,000 yards passing, 31 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. He's ran for another 500 yards, 4 touchdowns on the ground, completing 71% of his passes. Drake May's the best quarterback in college football this year if you go by the numbers. And he's on a one-loss Power 5 team with a chance to make the ACC title game and potentially win it. If you don't think North Carolina could potentially beat Clemson, you're out of your mind. Everybody keeps talking about what's going to happen if Clemson runs the table and ends up 12-1 with an ACC title. Will they get in? Well, what about North Carolina? I guess they probably won't get in, but the point is North Carolina, especially offensively, has been a really good team this year, and just absolutely nobody talking about them. They got to go on the road and play Wake Forest. They're going to blow Wake Forest out. How is North Carolina a 3-point underdog in this game? This makes no sense to me. I'm taking North Carolina on the money line to win outright. North Carolina might score 50 points in this game. Give me the Tar Heels to humble a not very good Wake Forest team. This is weird. North Carolina's a 3.5-point underdog on the road to Wake Forest. There's got to be something I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Has half the team got the flu? Anyway, give me the Tar Heels over Wake Forest and lay the points in that. What else do we got? Any other ranked games? Florida State on the road at Syracuse. I think Florida State's going to absolutely destroy Syracuse in the giant bouncy house or whatever they call that stadium, that dome they play in up there in upstate New York. Florida State's a 7-point road favorite. Demolished Miami last week, 45-3. Florida State's a team that's playing with a lot of confidence. The opposite is true for Syracuse. Started out hot 6-0. They've now lost 3 in a row. Their quarterback is injured, who was the best player on the team. I think the Nolas go on the road to Syracuse, take care of business. Give me Florida State, lay to 7 points. Is that it for ranked teams? No. Stanford at Utah, 10 o'clock on ESPN. No one cares about this one. Utah's going to win. Stanford is horrible yet again. Is David Shaw going to keep his job at Stanford? He's one of the most well-liked and most respected coaches, not just in the Pac-12, but in all of college football. But at the end of the day, your number one, your primary job as a college football coach is to win games. And right now, David Shaw ain't winning nearly enough of them. They're going to get destroyed on the road at Utah. This game will not be close. Utah's a 24-point favorite. I'm a David Shaw fan myself. I'll take Stanford to cover the 24, but man, tough times for the tree up there at Stanford. Arizona on the road at UCLA, 10:30 on Fox. UCLA will win this one. They're a 19.5-point favorite. I don't understand why Southern Cal is ranked ahead of UCLA. Someone's going to just, I guess, have to explain that to me. UCLA's got one loss. It's to Oregon. I think Oregon's one of the best 5 or 6 teams in the country. That's UCLA's only loss. I know Southern Cal only has one loss, but it's to Utah. Utah's a good team, but they're not great. I don't understand that. It makes no sense to me. Now, it doesn't really matter because UCLA and Southern Cal are going to play here in a couple of weeks. Next week, actually, I think. It's either next week or the week after. Anyway, UCLA is a 19.5-point home favorite against Arizona. If this is on the road, could be a trap-type situation when you look at UCLA's schedule the next couple of weeks. At home, I don't see that happening. I think UCLA takes care of business. Give me UCLA, lay the 19.5. There you go. That's all the ranked games, brief thoughts on them. I know this was a long video, but I've been breaking these videos down and just doing 2 or 3 games per video, but I decided to just run through the top 25 today. So there you go. Let me know in the comments down below what you think I got wrong, and have a good morning.